guest today is Carl Madison. He has a remarkable and unforgettable story to tell us. Carl, today you're going to help teach a lot of people and give them greater understanding. And first of all, more than anything, I want to welcome you to our show. We're very proud to have you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I started from Colombia. I was raised in Manizales, and my parents abandoned me when I was little with my brother and my sister, and we lived on the streets. And so at the age of 5, I became an adult and raising an infant and a 4-year-old. And by the time I was almost 6 years old, I ended up killing another human being to survive so I could eat. We got put in an orphanage shortly after that, and got adopted here in the United States. But I wasn't adopted as a son, I was adopted as a slave. I was raised in a barn, and I spent almost all of my adolescent years just dealing with all that. And it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I got out of that situation and was able to went into foster care. But I spent all of my time, I worked, I went to school. I had very distorted concepts of life. I was in 4th grade before I found out that crows were called crows. I was raised my whole life. They were nigger chickens. And so you could see that around the small town that I was raised in, a lot of the bigotry that existed there. And that in the culture that we were raised, really, me and my brother and my sister were the only Hispanic people. Everybody had already their own biased opinions, and so they condoned what was happening. And part of it, too, having a legacy is our last name. We own lots of acreage and we own a lot of stuff, so we have a lot of pull. We also had family members who were judges. And so there was a lot of, no one said anything, even though everybody kind of knew it was wrong. And so I spent my whole life, like I said, if I wanted to have something to do with the other family, I would have to pay for that. So I'd have to, not my normal chores or not my normal workload, I'd have to find another alternative way of making money so that I could do the same thing they were doing. And if I wanted clothes, it was the same thing. So I grew up always fending for myself and taking care of myself, and also always taking care of my brother and my sister. Ended up having just a, really messed up thought about relationships. I mean, even though I dated a girl in high school, I could barely hold her hand. I was so afraid to touch, and very distorted concepts of relationships. I really viewed that most people who wanted something from you were going to hurt you or abandon you. And so I had pretty much trained myself as a self-defense mechanism to basically calculate my relationships with people at such a point that I could execute the day that we were terminated, so that you would walk away, I didn't have to worry about saying goodbye, it was done. And that way I didn't have to get any closer or invest any farther, but I got what I wanted. And at the same time, because of being so self-sufficient, I was very good at managing and taking care of stuff. And as 18 years old, when I became a corporate manager, large corporation, but it was all because of these character flaws that were my shield guard. Actually were strengths. I had no idea that they were strengths at the time. I was just trying to preserve my own life. I spent, especially when I was like 21, after the drinking age was accessible, I spent so many hours just trying to kill myself because I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel, and I just wanted to be so numb. But I would practice, and I would do it. I'd go sit in the back of my pickup truck. I had a handgun that worked very well. I could point at the tree, fire it, the projectile would come out, but I could put it to my head and it would just click, 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 click. And I tried many other ways of killing myself, would not work. But either that or be interrupted. At this time, I'd just been really dissipated from my own family, my biological family. I spent many hours really, like in my own mind, actually I just spent kind of like the Count of Monte Cristo, where you're planning this whole revenge of how could I get you back? What was the worst thing I could possibly do to you? Like, to really pay back what you've done to me. And I would plan out all these really lavish ideas of how I would go about doing it. And every day trying to make that goal and how I could make one step to do this. And all just for the count of revenge. And being able to just say, you took everything from me, I will destroy your world. And I was a highly vindictive person, but I was very tactful. I could hunt and wait and just be very patient for long periods of time before I would attack or do anything to any person that had either hurt me. Very passive aggressive in that manner. And it got to a point where it just would consume me. Most of the time, that's what I was doing. I was just planning this out and just really going to a place where, because there's the only thing that's actually kept me alive was this thought of, if I could just put them down the same level that I've been feeling for the last 18 years of my life, maybe they would get it. Maybe they would understand that, whoa, wow, we really did something wrong here. And I spent hours just angry at God. I would flip him off. I would just be cursing him for hours, because I was raised in a very conservative Baptist background, and my concept of God became so convoluted that I just would get so angry and just rage out at him. I mean, I could spend 20, 30 minutes just raging on God, just, you know, you're nothing. How could you possibly allow something like this to happen? And you're watching this. Is this funny to you? Is this a joke to you? You know, am I just part of it and amused to you? And just, here's life, and watch this. This is really funny. Watch how he gets mad. And I would just ponder this, and to a point where I know they're very self-destructive to me. And then just between all the drugs and alcohol and just completely letting every inhibition in my life just drop. I didn't care. Just really began to sleep around and just really go to the greatest lengths. I had no care. But a lot of it is just, I wanted to feel something, so I would try everything. So if it was close to death or near death, I always gave it a try. If it was taboo or something you shouldn't be doing, I would consider it, I would look into it, research it, then do it. I was always very tactful about anything I got myself into, the pros and cons and what would that affect me. And I would always think that way. And so I was just really, at that time of my life, was so concerned about whether or not I would actually make it to tomorrow, just because I realized that any given day, because of this, the things I would do would probably kill me. And just pushing the limits of that kind of stuff, just because I wanted to feel something and just feel that rush, you know, like when you get a police officer that's in your window, that nervous feeling actually made me feel alive inside. And so I got to a place where it was just, that was pretty much my whole existence. I worked, and I drowned myself in work more than anything, because it just kept me at bay from people. I could work, and I could separate work from everything else very well. I was very disciplined about my work. At 12 o'clock was my Cinderella hour. As soon as 12, I was in bed, but drank from the second I woke up to the time I went to bed every single day, and still did my job at the highest level of excellence. And people would just had no clue most of the time that I was even like this, and because I had learned all the mechanisms to keep myself at guard and at safe point, so that you could never get any closer than I would let you. And it kept, you know, especially for business world, that was a very, very good thing in the business world, because they could never use my personal life against me. They were, you know, it kept it very professional that way. But one day, I was struggling with just wanting to kill myself and just all the other things that were going on in the rat race of my mind. I have a biological brother, and we went up to Three Sisters, and again, coming from that extreme, pushing life to its limits in the core, I had a pack mule and a horse, and we wanted to hike around the base of the Three Sisters at the end of March. And in March, there's still snow, it's still icy, it's below freezing every night, but it's starting to melt out. So we walked in with a horse and a mule, and we'd already 2 days into the excursion, and the snow melt was melting in this creek area, and we had to cross it. And so as we crossed over to the other side, we were pulling a horse and a mule across, and they both sank up to their neck in mud. And you can't, you know, an animal that weighs that much, you can't pull an animal out of that because of the vacuum that exists in that. And immediately, as soon as that happened, I was so filled with such a rage, and I don't know how to describe it other than, I mean, really murderous rage. I was so angry, because the second it was happening, I mean, I was looking at God going, again, you're doing this again to me, how much more, you know, and I'm a survivalist, so screw you, I will survive. You can't kill me. I will fight to the bitter end. And so I started thinking, planning everything I had to do to even just sustain myself, and just, okay, I'm going to have to build shelter. All my clothes are on the mule net. Can I build a bridge to get to the mule so I can get my clothes out? Or am I going to have to build in big, quite a few fires to maintain heat so that we could stay warm? Let's start gathering rocks so that we could heat the rocks so that we could stay warm, because the biggest thing is we're going to die of hypothermia. That was my very first thought. We will die of hypothermia if we cannot find a way of getting warm. So we're just, and my brother's kind of looking at me like this isn't a big deal to him. And in my mind, it was just, hell on earth was just going on. And every survival thing was kicking in. And about that time, my brother slips and falls. And he splits his head open on a rock. And as I'm watching this, I'm just like, is this really happening? Is this, now my brother's unconscious. Now do I have to stop doing everything it is to prepare, keep my life alive. Now I'm having to invest my other time that I don't have much of to now give my brother back his life. And so began the CPR and everything else. And I was just at the point of I was so angry at God. I was just cussing him the whole time. Just how dare you, and just every profanity that could come out of anyone's mouth was just raging relentlessly at God, just telling him, how could you possibly do this? Because he's not coming conscious. He's not coming out of being unconscious. And I was just freaking out, because he's the only person I love. Everyone else on this planet could die, and I didn't care. But if he died, that meant he meant the world to me. He was my biological brother, and my sister had integrated, because she was an infant, had integrated into the family. So she actually got to step outside of that bubble, and it was just me and my brother. And so, just at this place of raging mad, I just gave up, and I said, okay, God, kill me. If this is what you've been asking for from me, then just do it. Kill me. All I ask is let my brother live. And if I must die and go to hell because I've been such a heathen, good. I don't really care. Just spare my brother. Time seemed to go forever in moments like that, but I don't know how long this is going on at all. And the next thing, I catch myself, and I'm battling in my own self, but I could feel it in just the deep part of my core being was, God, I'll give you everything. You know that if I dedicate myself to any given thing, I will pursue it to the ends of the earth, and I won't stop. I'm very relentless. And so, but I'll give you my life. All I ask is that you spare my brother. And I don't know how long I prayed that, but when I got up, my brother was looking at me like I was a complete idiot, because he'd never seen me beg for anything. And so he was looking at me really weird, not really understanding the situation. And when I looked across the creek, that horse and the mule were completely dry, not a speck of mud on them. And I was just like, oh my, this is unreal. This shouldn't have happened. I know what occurred. I know that, my brother can remember up to the mules being sunk into the mud, and that's it. But now, he's looking at it going, how'd they get out? What did you do to get them out of there? And I'm like, you don't know anything that happened? Do you know why that blood is on those rocks right there? No. So I didn't tell anybody. For 6 months, when I came home, we turned around, went home. I didn't tell anybody for 6 months, because all I thought I was going to hear from everybody was, get off the drugs, quit your drinking. Because that's about what it equated to. It's like, are you hallucinating? Only in this moment could something like that happen. And so I didn't say anything to anybody for the longest time. And finally, there was a Catholic lady, and I was friends with this family, and she said, I don't know why I'm telling you this, I really don't. And she said, I know that you would not fit in our church. You couldn't fit in our church. I said, but there's this crazy church that your mindset would probably fit into. And I'm thinking, this is kind of weird coming from you. She's a very conservative, very old school woman, amazing woman. And friends of this, my brother, kind of a spiritual brother of mine, and we were hanging out at their house, and here's this woman telling me this, and I'm thinking, you have no idea that in my life, something radical has happened. You don't even have a clue. But you're telling me where I should go to church, which I thought was ironic. So I said, well, I'll consider it. So about a month and a half goes by, and I used to walk by this church all the time in my drunken stupor stage and pee on their doors all the time, because it's a church, and I hated church. So here I am now, and I realize this is a church I've been peeing on their doors. for the last 5 years of my life, Again, that feeling of uneasiness of this, because one, I thought if there was one place in the world that if I ever want to feel judged, go to church. And because that's the background I knew, everybody was so afraid of messing up or telling anybody that they messed up, because it became the church news and everybody heard about it, and I hated that. I always hated that, because I always thought everybody messes up, but why do we beat them to the curb? And so I thought, well, here it goes. And so I told God, I'm going to go into this church, and I don't know why I'm doing it. He said, but if I go into this church and I don't feel welcome, then I will tell you to screw you and the boat you rode in on, and I'll burn this church to the ground. I'll do anything I can to make this church go away. I went in, and this amazing woman, she's now my spiritual mom. She's more mom to me than anybody else. And she welcomed me. Like you were saying, I faced an adversity in my life where I did face the reality of my own, not only just my faith, whether I believed in what I believed in was true or not, and how far did that take me. And in that moment, I ended up choosing God as someone I would be willing to serve, and I would serve God. And so going to, at the time was the Vineyard, and meeting this amazing woman who just becomes my mom, she just began to invest in my life. She never pushed me any farther than I would be pushed, but she loved purely. She knew that I was messed up and was always willing just to let me go if I had the flight feeling going on, that she would let me and wouldn't try to make me something I wasn't. And she wasn't trying to make me a cookie cutter, which I could never fit in anything like that. And she would just really invest and bring people around that would maybe spark something in me that would say, I like that. So she would bring all of these people, and she is so networked that she knew all these people across the country where they did amazing ministries or they did amazing things. And she would invite them to her house. And I would get to sit and listen, and I would pick up all of this stuff. And I've always valued that you should always surround yourself with smarter people than yourself so that you can absorb their knowledge. And so here I'm like, this is heaven to me, because here's all these very intelligent people. So I did not realize that I was absorbing all of this information at such a high speed in my mind. But what ended up happening is some people would say things like, one of the things they were talking about was like deliverance, which we watch movies that have, exorcists and that. So it was like, this is really crazy. But it piqued my interest. And I thought about it, do we have some uglies in our life that haunt us? And like for me, I dealt with just being so ashamed that I couldn't be myself. Like I was so ashamed of Carl, just my own identity. Like I was so ashamed of it. Like it had some very derogative meaning in it, and I couldn't look in the mirror. Like I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Because I just thought of myself as a nothing. So why waste my time looking in a mirror at nothing? And this was something in there. But he would say things, and I would be like, I feel like that. I understand what you just said. I don't know how to compute it into what's going on, but I need whatever you're just talking about. Like, I'm willing to try that if it works. And again, I was very, I'd go home, read everything I could about it, but there'd be something in me that would poke me and say, would you be willing to let it go? I'm pondering this, going to go do this. And so at the same time that this is happening, I really struggle with touch. Like, if you touch me, especially if I'm sleeping, the fight in me is on. Like, I will fight if I'm sleeping and you touch me if I'm sleeping. And even now, I'm married, and I still really struggle with that sometimes in my life, where if my kids run and jump on me, it's dangerous for them as much as it's dangerous for me, because I will then go into self-preserve, where I'm trying not to hurt them. At the same time, I'm already reacted to that touch. And it's something I'm walking out still, because it's something that I, put inside myself to protect myself. And that's the hardest one, is actually the physical reaction. The emotional reaction actually went away, but this physical kind of muscle memory thing is still engaged in me sometimes. And so I'm in the middle of a service where they're talking, why don't you come up here and get ministered on? I'm thinking, I hate that, because someone's going to touch me, lay hands on me. I hate that stuff. I can't. It makes me freak out. It causes everything in my core being just to spaz out. And it hurt. It actually that spasm in me actually hurt my body. It would physically hurt. And just even the slightest touch, like just touching like that, would make everything in my core being just crush, and like it's just shrinking in. And so because of just being beaten so much that I just would react as the second that touch would happen. So they're saying, come on out if you want healing. And it's like, I want healing, but you can't touch me. And how do you tell that to these people who, they just assume that everybody's had a normal life? Somehow this projection of everybody should be all, hunky-dory and have a great life, but we have physical healings in our body, but not realize that sometimes the emotional scars in people's life are just as physical. And so, as I go up to the front, I said, forget it. So I go back to my seat. And as I'm sitting there, I just say, okay, God, you know that I don't have the ability to get up there and do this. I don't. Because one, I may hurt somebody. Two, I'll run away. The only two things that will happen is someone's getting hurt or I'm running away. And if I run away and disappear and start over again. I don't have a problem with that. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there, and I was 22 years old, and I already needed surgery in my shoulders I had overworked them. I had worn out the rotator cuffs in my shoulders, and to the point that they were the average of someone who was in their 80s or 90s, because I'd already had worked so much. I had overworked them that they were just grinding on themselves. And so to raise my hands up would just give me such a shooting pain. So as I'm sitting there, it's just like, I want you to touch me, God. I don't want them to touch me. I want you to touch me. Because I know if you touch me, at least I'm going to be healed. I'm going to, something's got to happen if you touch me. So I was asking, and then there's something in me that just turned, and I was like, I'm not even asking anymore. I'm telling you. If you said that I am your son, you call me son, you call me friend, you call me servant, at least you could reach out and touch me. And about that time, I started to raise my hands, and I just felt like just this electricity just hit my body, almost like I was lit on fire almost. And I had my hands just completely up, just in no pain, and I was just like, what is happening to me? And I remember just almost freaking out, just like, what in the world just happened? And I knew it then, and I've never had any problem with them again. But I was healed, and at the same time, but I felt like something in me broke, like this really dark shadow broke off of me, where I was like, maybe someone could hug me. I could be hugged. Just even that thought was like, before, the very thought of you hugging me was like, you can't hug me, I'm unhuggable. And that thought of, maybe I could be hugged. And I thought, that's not me. That is not my nature. But yet something in me. So I went back up to my mom and was telling her what had happened. And so she was explaining it to me, and the next thing, she's like, do you remember you were talking about being curious about, whether or not you'd want to have some delivery? And I said, yeah. She goes, do you want to do it? And I said, I would love to do it now, because I could handle someone having their hand on my shoulder. And so I scheduled an appointment that I would go do this. Well, at the same time, there was this awesome woman who came to our church, and she touched on a subject that just absolutely infuriated me. And she says, today we're going to talk about forgiveness. And out loud, the people who were sitting next to me had no idea what I had gone through. I had just said, I hate this lady. I can deal with almost everything else. But this forgiveness was just like, I'd read enough now to understand what it was, and I didn't want to. I still wanted to proceed on this plan that one day I would go and wreak havoc and get my revenge. And that was really what I was still set on, even though other things were going on, and that was starting, the conflict was beginning in my mind with, is that the right thing to do? And there was just this huge identity crisis that was going on, not physically, but just it's internally, spiritually. I had this identity crisis going on about good versus evil, or is that bad or is this good? Am I normal or am I not normal? And so as this woman is talking, she said, if anybody's struggling with this in their life, I would like for you to come up. I'm thinking, why is it always we have to do this in front of people? Like, where is the dignity and in this stuff, And I sat there just frozen, just at a point of just like, am I going to do this? And all of a sudden, all of the rage and the anger and just the bitterness from just the being raped and being beaten and just completely demoralized. You know, I was called, just derogatory names my whole life, and that I would never amount to any. All of this stuff just started, buffering just in my being. I could hear it. I could audibly hear this, and I could sense it and smell all the smells that were going on during the times that all this stuff was happening. And I just feel the raging anger from it all, just how broken I was, and at the place I could see myself being broken. And I'm like, I'm not liking this, and I have to forgive the people who did this to me. And I'm like, I can't forgive them. I can't. And so, but something in me still said, you need to go up and do this. And so I go up. Now the woman who's standing across from me is a Native American woman. I've never met her in my life at the time. She's a complete stranger to me. She was part of the prayer ministry team. And I am just like, I don't know about this. I'm about to turn around and go away. And she goes, what do you need to ask for forgiveness for? And I know at the same time I don't. Like, I know what it is. At the same time, I really don't. Because I'm in such conflict in myself over all of this. And because part of me, to be honest, I liked being a nothing. It became comfortable. It became a part of who I was. Even though I hungered for other than that, but there was a place where it became normal. And realizing that if I do this, I'm actually letting that go and having to make another choice. And I didn't like that thought. And I didn't actually like to dwell on that as that's a probability. And so as she began to pray for me, and I'll never forget it because it just messed with me so hard. And it was, God, I forgive my real mom and dad for abandoning me and leaving me to die. And she startled her. She pushes me off of her like, what are you saying? I forgive my real mom and dad for abandoning me and leaving me to die. And she just goes, would you forgive me? I gave up my firstborn son because I was on drugs and alcohol. And this is the one and only person who could even begin to measure at all what was going on with this identity of this. And so here we're both at a place where we're both being healed at the same time. But I'm like, this doesn't happen. I mean, what are the odds of this ever happening? Like, the one person I needed to be able to articulate this to was stood in front of me that day. And that moment changed my life dramatically. I would say that would be actually the beginning of actually my healing, my eternal healing. I had a lot of physical things happening, and I had a lot of mental, but my heart and my spirit was just so hurt from just being deteriorated and just being so broken that I felt like I was a nobody, and that everything in my core being was that I could never achieve anything. Even though I had achieved many things in my life because I wanted to prove it wrong, inside I could feel that void, that lie that said I was nothing. And that in showing that it required that you had to use physical or just the most vulgarity of life to suppress that into so many human beings so that you could push them into the ground to forcing their submission. And realizing all of a sudden this is coming into my brain where it's like, this isn't true anymore. This is a lie.